Well, then let's get into it. Awesome. Bridget, it's great to be here with you today for the first of these Earth Talks on Earth Hartford.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into this conversation. Just by way of introduction, I want to just highlight a little bit about your bio here. So, Bridget O'Brien, Chief Operating Officer of CLYNK, which is a tech-enabled bottle redemption company. We're going to get way more into what that means and what that's all about. But it's really an interesting approach to kind of how we do the bottle redemption thing. It's very much a tech and data-driven approach. And your background is really in all around making consumer products more accessible, right? More sort of using technology to help folks tap into this kind of world of sustainability. And it sounds like you've really taken this tech-inspired approach from the beginning. And so anyway, I'm going to get into it with you. So we'll learn much more about kind of what CLYNK is all about. It's great to have you. So I guess just take us back to the beginning. CLYNK has kind of pioneered this bag drop system. Can you talk a little bit about what inspired that and
Sure.
What's the problem that CLYNK is really solving?
Perfect. So I'll start by providing a little bit of context, and that is the bottle bill. There are 10 states in the country that have bottle bills, and many of them were enacted in the 70s as litter abatement programs. Fast forward to today, and what we have all learned from these states that have had bottle bills is that they're highly effective in increasing recycling rates because the consumer pays a deposit on that single-use beverage container, and then when that beverage container is redeemed before it gets recycled, that deposit is returned. So that is at a highest level what a bottle bill is. Maine was the third state. We are a Maine original. We started our company in 2005 and then launched our first collection point in 2006. And what inspired our founder, Clayton Kyle, was being out in the field and watching consumers either having to stand in front of a reverse vending machine and feed that reverse vending machine a container at a time. And these reverse vending machines were inside food retailers who are obligated in most every bottle bill state to take back containers that they sell. And so food retail stands for clean and fresh, and having people walk in with used beverage containers is really not congruent with how they operate as a business. And the other way to redeem at the time was going to a traditional hand count redemption center where you'd have to wait in line and somebody actually counts your containers. So our founder said there's got to be a better way. And he started first with high-speed technology to move those individual cans through a system quickly, and then started to think about the collection points, pulling it out of the food retailer so it's not inside their vestibule. And a person would just simply have to put their mixed redeemables in one bag, place a unique barcode, and drop it off, and then we would constantly be picking up these bags of redeemable containers, taking them back to the plant. So the whole value proposition and the whole concept was purpose-built for the consumer who wants to do the right thing. And it's typically a universal truth that people want to do the right thing, but when it comes to redemption and recycling, it's got to be easy and convenient. So that was the value stream for the consumer. It takes seconds. That's all you need to do. We'll process the containers and remand your deposit electronically. And for the food retailer, they no longer had to be in the business of counting containers or having to fix reverse vending machines constantly. So that was the inspiration. We knew that there was a better way.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to get a little bit later more into sort of the tech piece, but I want to stick on this kind of customer question for a minute, because you've mentioned, it's not always an easy process, right, to to take advantage of these redemption opportunities. So I guess what more have you learned about what motivates people to recycle, and how has that really shaped how you show up?
It's a great question, Sarah. First and foremost, the putting a deposit on a container is a very strong incentive. And if you look at most of the bottle bill states in the country, they have the highest recycling rates. I mean, there are states that have a 15% recycling rate. And then you look at the state of Oregon at 94%, and the state of Maine at 89 to 90%. And so that incentive works. And it works even better if that redemption process is really, really easy. And so that's what we bring to the table is we just flipped redemption on its head. The other incentive is I think some folks they don't want to create a new habit or they don't want to be bothered, but once they start to actually participate and they realize how simple it is, and then they get to see the impact that they're having. So what we do is we translate the recycling behavior, the number of containers that an individual is redeeming and recycling over a year. We do all these calculations to show the type of impact that you, Sarah, your recycling behavior positively had on the environment. And that's another way that we use kind of technology and data. We use the EPA's WARM model to do those calculations, and people really enjoy seeing what they've been able to accomplish simply by putting their redeemable containers and dropping them off on a weekly basis.
Yeah, so there's kind of a tangible, like you can measure as an individual the impact of actually taking your stuff to CLYNK.
That's exactly right. And in talking to a lot of people that, we have 500,000 accounts and it's growing. And in fact, we're having our biggest growth right now in this state, in Connecticut. So we did an analysis a few weeks ago that we called it account velocity. And we looked at when we launched in the state of Maine and when we launched in the state of New York and compared that to our pilot launch in Connecticut. And the 3 Connecticut locations ranked 1, 2, and 5 over the overall ecosystem. So we have 105 collection points across Maine and New York. And so that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Now, certainly what helped with that velocity was the 10-cent deposit. And so what happened in this state, for those that don't know it, is that Connecticut and Massachusetts had the lowest recycling rates of any jurisdiction in the world that had a container deposit or bottle bill. And the lawmakers and special interest groups and consumers all came together. And in January of 2023, that was the first phase of Connecticut's modernization of the bottle bill. So it included more containers than it did originally. And then on January 1 of 2024, the deposit increased from 5 cents to 10 cents. The same thing happened in the state of Oregon, and they saw a marked increase in the number of people that were redeeming their containers. And so again, these bottle bills were enacted in the early 70s, and throughout the 70s and a few in the early 80s. 5 cents was a lot more then than it is now. So kudos to the state of Connecticut for making the change that they did.
Yeah, I love knowing that. We're keeping up, we're getting ahead. That's
Oh,
awesome
well, you're well ahead of Massachusetts at this point.
I'll take it. Not that it's a competition.
So we have our work cut out for us in Massachusetts.
Okay. Well, and I'm curious, we were talking before a little bit about some of the sticking points of, as a user, I know when you go to the grocery store currently with kind of the existing solutions, sometimes the bottles aren't received, even though they say on the container that they should be. So, how are you kind of keeping up with those changes as they come?
That is such a good question, because it is true that, so interestingly enough, in the state of Maine, beverage manufacturers are obligated to provide the state with new barcode information, so everybody can keep up with it. That doesn't happen the way that it should happen. So we actually have a team of people that do the research. So when we don't have if we don't recognize a barcode, and it happens all the time because beverage manufacturers produce new products at a dizzying pace. It is almost impossible to keep up with. The other thing too that complicates things is that many beverage manufacturers will stamp all of their containers. So, Maine 5 cent, Connecticut 10 cent, CRV, which is California, but that product gets into other states. And so there's a lot of confusion and complexity when it comes to bottle bills. But what we try to do, our number one guiding principle is to get the consumer paid. And so we have taken it upon ourselves to do that level of research. And we can do it very quickly. And so what happens when we actually have reconciled a barcode and have determined that it is in fact redeemable, that in fact a deposit was made, then we will retroactively credit the consumer. You can't do that at a traditional hand count redemption center, and you can't do that with a reverse vending machine.
Interesting. So because you're keeping track of all of that, you're able
that
to
is
go
exactly
back
right.
eventually.
So we have a team of 3 people that do that.
That's very cool. Well, and I'm also curious if there's any kind of surprising behaviors in bottle bill states, something that maybe challenged your assumptions as you were scaling up, or you're still scaling up.
Yes, we're still scaling, especially in this state. One of the things that surprised me, and it wasn't about the recycling behavior so much as when we launched the pilot, it was all app-based. So in Maine and New York, we've been operating in those markets for so long that people use a physical card. Now we have an app in those markets too, so people are gravitating towards the app. And Connecticut has one of the highest cell phone usages of any state in the country, and so we thought everybody would just be super happy about downloading an app. You don't typically lose your phone. One of the biggest use cases for people calling in to CLYNK's customer support is that they've lost their card. And surprisingly, about 20% of the accounts that have opened, that have CLYNK accounts in Connecticut, are using the traditional card. So that surprised me. The other surprise is sometimes we see things in bags that you would never expect to find in a bag, and they have nothing to do with redeemable containers. Dead possums, guns, knives, wallets, wedding rings. We've seen a lot. And we always try to reunite because we know the person, but
maybe not the dead possum, but the wedding ring.
That one was an interesting customer service outbound to the person's account, and they had no idea it was in there. It must have crawled in, and it had been hit by a car. So I think that was not to get too graphic.
Well, and I'm also curious, kind of how much education have you needed to do around kind of what goes in the CLYNK bag versus other kinds of recycling? I could imagine maybe a little crossover there.
It is absolutely a challenge for us. I think initially, I'll use Maine as the example because we've been operating in Maine since 2005. People really understood the bottle bill, so they knew what was in it and what wasn't. But over time, they started to see CLYNK as a recycling company. And so we get the HDPE milk jugs, or we get steel cans. And it's not as if we want that product, but we recycle it. And so it is just part of the service now. In Connecticut, there is confusion. So in Connecticut, wine and spirits are not included in the program, but we're seeing a lot of wine and spirits. We see there's a lot of high noon that is consumed in the state of Connecticut. We're seeing a lot of it in our bags. And we reach out, so we can't pay, we can't, pay the person 10 cents for that product because they didn't pay a deposit on it. And so the nice thing about CLYNK is that it is an account-based system. So we're able to do a one-on-one we can either have a conversation over the phone or through email, whatever the case may be. And so one of the things that we've done in Connecticut in our brochure is the inside panel shows, what is covered and what isn't at a high level. So education is a big part of what we do.
Yeah, makes total sense. And again, it's great that it seems like, again, the technology is such a core part of that, because you're able to kind of track everything and then follow up with individuals. So talk a little bit more about kind of how technology is part of your sort of value proposition as a company and how that's helping you scale.
Yeah, so we leverage technology to what we say drive a competitive advantage and a better experience for the consumer. And so if we had a video running of our plant right now, I could point out how technology is used. But, it starts with having that unique identifier. So if we had a CLYNK bag right here and it was, you had an account, that code on that bag is uniquely yours. So when we pick that bag up and we take it to the plant, all of our, we have processing lines, we use high-speed equipment, and the product goes through a camera array. It's 360 degree, because you never know how the container is going to enter that camera array. And we capture the barcode, and then instantly it is bumped up against our databases, our product barcode databases. So we know that you have Poland Spring, you have 100 Poland Spring water bottles because you love the Poland Spring brand. So we know right away that we need the invoice for the handling fee will go to Primo Brands because they make it. And we know that because we scanned your unique barcode before we put your containers through the counting equipment, we know those are all your containers. So all of your containers go through. It's very, very fast, very rapid. And then immediately those deposits are being electronically remanded into your account. So we use technology that way. We use data, and we don't sell our data at all. We take that very, very seriously, and we have a very extensive privacy policy because we know what you're in your bags, so to speak. But we use data to detect fraud. That's one way that we use data. And I can't get into the ways that we do it, but we have already identified one way that a few citizens in the state are trying to take advantage of the system.
That's fascinating. Well, but also really good to know that you're not using general folks' data because you are collecting quite a lot. I'm sure there's a lot of interesting information about trends and things. And
the reality is we're obligated to do it. We have to ensure that the containers, we've got to know what they are and who they belong to, so we are remanding the correct deposit. So some states are easy, like Connecticut, it's 10 cents a container, but Maine has two redemption values, 5 cents and 15 cents. And that, you might see some other states do that, but being able to detect that and know that we are paying you for every single redeemable container, and that conversely, we are then billing the beverage manufacturer or distributor the handling fee, because that's how any redemption operator gets paid, be it TAMRA or INVIPCO with RVMs or traditional hand count, is that our money is made through the handling fee. That deposit that the consumer pays is just a pass-through.
Yeah, great. That's so helpful to hear. And I'm actually curious too, just zooming way out, do you have a sense of how many containers you've been able to collect and essentially diverting from landfills?
Yeah, about 2.7 billion at this point. And to give you a sense of scope and scale, in the summers, we can put almost 900,000 containers through 2 shifts.
I can't even
in a plant.
quite like comprehend, these numbers when you're thinking of it. I mean, that's a pretty incredible environmental impact.
It really is. And what's amazing is when you are in a plant, and we open up our plants for tours, the containers just don't stop coming. They just, it's
Nonstop.
it's almost, you get awestruck when you just see, and then you just see them go through, and then we bail them up and they return as containers.
Are there any other ways that you're measuring impact besides, how many bottles, or what other metrics are you kind of keeping an eye on?
Yeah, so we keep track of the environment metrics, how many car emissions saved. And again, we can, there are hundreds of ways that we can identify, reduction of carbon footprint and things of that nature. The other way that we measure impact is the number of people that are in the program. We know that the more people that recycle, the more impact we're going to have or positive impact that we're going to have on the environment. And so this whole concept of making it as clean and convenient as possible, relies on, I've said it in the past, the consumer is the hero because they're the ones that are actually taking the action. So the number of people and the number of accounts is another measure of impact. If we can attract more people into the CLYNK bag drop ecosystem, we'll be able to deliver more environmental impact progress.
That's that sort of longer term sustainable behavior change too.
That's
on
right.
some level that you get in the habit, you can keep making that expand.
And once you do it, once you start doing it, it's funny that, so when we came to Connecticut, so we launched in Connecticut on January 7th, and we sent, and myself included, we came down to Connecticut and we worked with consumers, and it was so fun to watch them kind of go, oh, this sounds a little complicated. And I said, no, we're going to walk you right through the process. And we did it with them. And they're like, oh my God, this is so easy. Then you almost get a high off of it because you get your money back, almost within 24 hours, but you know that you've done something really cool. And it just kind of builds on itself.
Yeah.
And then what we found, like our biggest marketing tool is word of mouth. We spend very little money in marketing. So somebody feels so good about what they're doing that they bring others into the program.
Yeah, they tell their friends.
They tell their
I think
friends.
that's a huge part of kind of the whole, sustainability, green, being conscious, eco-conscious, and so much of that has always been true, I would say. Well, and I understand that you have strong roots in the local communities since the beginning. So tell us more. Why is that so central to CLYNK, and kind of how are you building that more in Connecticut? I mean, it's still only a few months in, so what will that look like?
We really did build CLYNK with community kind of at the center. And so I think one of the coolest things the company has done is the CLYNK to Give program. So it is a fundraising platform for 501c3s, causes, Boy Scouts, any group of people that want to leverage redemption-based recycling to drive funds for their particular cause. And we're almost, I think we just crested over $5 million raised for all of these CLYNK to Give customers. And I mean, the stories that result from a really successful fundraising drive are just amazing. And so not only are they able to raise funds, and so they go into the community and they get the entire community involved and activated in a way that lifts the entire community as well, and also creates a revenue stream, a much needed revenue stream for these causes. We have, I think, about 3,000 CLYNK to Give accounts. And when we roll out officially in the state and go beyond the pilot, I think CLYNK to Give is going to be a really significant program in this state.
I love hearing that. And actually that kind of, again, puts it a little bit in perspective. 5 million raised from these, 5 to 15 cent deposits is pretty substantial.
Well, I think you're going to see it really, really grow with a 10 cent. So you'll get a lot of people participating.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So looking ahead, what would you say is the future of this bottle bill legislation, and what would you say to the states that don't have one yet?
They have to get one ASAP. So interestingly enough, there are 2 states that, one state has gotten very close, the state of Washington, but they didn't pass it, but they likely will. They have an EPR program in place. But Rhode Island could, in fact, be the next state that launches a bottle bill. So they've had a study underway over the last, I would say, year and a half. We've gone down to testify in front of the legislators. They're really excited about implementing a bottle bill because they have a very significant litter problem in that state. Nips are a litter problem everywhere. So it'll be interesting to see if that state does pass a bottle bill and what will be covered in that bottle bill. New Jersey has been exploring one. Maryland has. I'm hoping that Massachusetts will modernize theirs. Europe is very far ahead of us. Almost every country has some kind of bottle bill. But it's definitely recycling and redemption is not going away. It's only going to grow.
And then I'm going to wrap up. I just have a couple last questions, though, because I know earlier we were talking a little bit about sort of beyond redemption, there's also more kind of opportunity perhaps in the space of reuse. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about what that's looking like and what you'd like to see on the horizon.
Yeah, so we actually do help with reuse right now. There's a local dairy in Maine called Smiling Hill, and we take their containers back, and they have their own ecosystem in that. They have their own deposit. It is not covered in the bottle bill. And so we return a lot of those containers back to them. They clean them. There are a lot of organizations that are looking to build out the infrastructure and strategy around reuse, because that is true circularity, right? You're just taking that product, cleaning it, and getting that product back out in the marketplace. And I think that's another demonstration of the fact that putting deposits on product that is in fact circular or can come back without tapping the Earth's resources as a container again, more and more of that is going to, more fruit will bear because of it. And there's a lot of academic institutions that are looking into infrastructure around reuse, but I think that's going to be the next big wave.
That's exciting. And I know we work with a lot of entrepreneurs in the work that I do at Reset, and so often we hear folks thinking creatively about and really wanting solutions like this as well for their own, impact and sustainability. So it's great to know that there's kind of, this new way of kind of approaching that, and maybe they should think about reaching out to you too, in addition to the customers.
We're always willing to help anybody that wants to talk to a company that's been there and done that.
Yeah. Well, my last question is, where in Connecticut can we find you now? And what's kind of the best way for Connecticut folks to tap into this opportunity?
So there's, we are in 4 locations right now, 2 in Bristol, 1 in Simsbury, and 1 in Southington. Windsor will be the 5th. And then our goal is to roll out across the state.
Awesome.
So we'll be everywhere, Sarah.
I can't wait. Well, I'm really excited. This was such a pleasure to get to hear more about what you guys are up to. I'm just looking forward to seeing it continue. And thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. I love talking about CLYNK's Bag Drop. It is really a good program, and we look forward to really taking Bag Drop throughout the state.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget.
Thank you.